Hi, my name is Hayden Haynes, and I'm the Operations Manager here at the Seneca-Iroquois National Museum. And today we're going to talk a little bit about one of our exhibits, the Kinzua Dam. So a little backstory on the dam. It all started in the 1700s with a series of devastating floods in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania region. That was the area primarily affected by these floods. So in 1936, a very significant flood occurred, which they call the Great St. Patrick's Day flood. It cost $50 million in damage for the Pittsburgh region, and that's what really prompted the next step, which got closer to the dam. That's when local businessmen and local politicians began lobbying for Congress. And what in essence happened later in 1936 is they ended up passing the Copeland Omnibus Flood Control Act of 1936. So the Army Corps of Engineers was tasked with building this dam. And the Seneca people fought against it, and in a series of court cases, 1957, 1958, unfortunately they lost those battles, and the case actually made it to the Supreme Court in 1959. Even though the court didn't actually hear the case, what that in essence did was make the lower court case rulings be the deciding factor in progress and to move on forward with the dam. And a key point in this battle was in 1957 when the United States ruled that the Army Corps of Engineers could build this dam due to the domestic law of eminent domain, which went against the Treaty of 1794 and ultimately the sovereignty of the Seneca Nation. So even though the Army Corps of Engineers was tasked with building this dam, the Onondaga people actually enlisted the help of prominent engineer Arthur Morgan, who developed an alternative plan for the dam that would flood less of the Haudenosaunee Onondaga land on the Allegheny Territory. But unfortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers ultimately declined that plan. And this is actually an interesting story. Johnny Cash, well-known musician, actually wrote a song about this whole time period of the Kinzua Dam building, and the song's called "As Long as the Grass Shall Grow," which is an excerpt from the Treaty of Canandaigua, 1794. But his song is about the Onondaga people and the building of this dam at this time, and he talks about Arthur Morgan, and he talks about the treaties and all the promises broken and everything like that. And actually, after he wrote that song in support of the Onondaga people, he was invited to this area, and he was adopted by the Onondaga people. So another interesting thing is Senator John F. Kennedy actually supported the Onondaga people with this battle against the dam initially. Then, of course, he was running for president for the 1960 presidency. Pennsylvania is a big state, a key state that he really needed to win, so he kind of felt the pressures, and ultimately he changed his stance and began to support the building of the dam. He actually wrote a letter to the president at the time of the Seneca Nation, 1961, Basil Williams, where he, and it's part of our exhibit, where he talks about how there is not possible to stop the construction of the dam. The dam ultimately flooded 10,000 acres of the Onondaga territory right here on the Allegheny territory, which is the equivalent of approximately 1/3 of this entire territory. So when you put it into that perspective, you know, it kind of paints it in a different light. That's quite a bit of land that was lost. And ultimately what happened is 130 families had to relocate who lived along the river. And what they were given was actually about 3 acres apiece. And they settled in 2 different areas. The Steenburg area was a relocation site, and the Jimerson area was the other location site. There's 500 acres on Jimerson and 500 acres in the Steenburg community. So of course, when you're talking about a dam, you're talking about a lot of effects that happen both naturally and to people and surrounding communities. A lot of the Onondaga people lived along the Allegheny River, which is the affected areas. So these families had farms, and they had, you know, family cemeteries in their homes, and everything that was affected. These people were forced out of their homes by the Army Corps of Engineers. You can hear some of these elders telling stories of them coming home and finding their house on fire because the Army Corps of Engineers had burned it down. So in addition to the people who lived closer to the Salamanca area that had to relocate, what's of note is that the corn planter grant, which was a tract of land given to corn planter and his descendants by George Washington, which is right inside the border of Pennsylvania, that actually also gets flooded as well. And much of that land now is uninhabitable. So what's interesting about that is that in Pennsylvania at this point, because of the flooding of the corn planter tract, there is no native lands, tribal lands within the entire state of Pennsylvania. So I think that's kind of interesting to mention as well. So when you look at this big mural, it's kind of like an optical illusion. There's a spot on the ground where you stand, and when you stand there, the wall kind of becomes one, even though it merges onto the sidewall. And that is because that's to signify what our elders went through and what they saw as this giant, insurmountable wall that they could not get past. So when you stand here and you reflect on the wall and how big the dam is, and then you walk through that door right there, that's a way of signifying about how our elders and how our people have gotten past the wall. They've gotten past the dam now. So of course the effects are still felt to this day by where people reside. Steamboat community is still, alive and well. The Jimerson Town community is thriving, of course, and that just shows our resiliency. And to honor and remember that event in the 1960s that devastated our elders, who are elders now, and those who have passed, there's an event every year that happens. It's called Remember the Removal. This year, it's on September 26th. You can find more information on the Seneca Nation of Indians website about the event. It's a virtual event this year. Normally what happens is there's a walk from one of these communities to the other, or areas affected by the flood where people had to leave and be removed. So I encourage you to check out the Seneca Nation of Indians website, like I said, and keyword search Remember the Removal. And unfortunately, the Anonsiguande Cultural Center is still closed due to the pandemic. But when we do reopen, we really hope you would come and join us and see the Kinzua Dam exhibit for yourself, and all the other great exhibits that we have. So take care, and we hope to see you soon.